Losing Akira Toriyama is just about the largest blow imaginable to the world of manga. The most influential illustrator, in my opinion, who's ever lived. I know the argument can be made and is arriving now because of the fact that I called him this in my memorial videos, and people didn't want to start bickering about it right away. But Osamu Tezuka is the most important manga author of all time. I don't know if he personally inspired as many people to draw as Toriyama did. Now, you could say that because Toriyama wouldn't have, he probably wouldn't have been drawing if not for Tezuka. It makes Tezuka more influential at a core level. I think that if you want to keep going back through history, like there's always somebody who inspired the person you're talking about. It always goes back to they saw something that was the spark to make all of this happen. And so I think it's most fair to credit when we're talking about influence, when we're talking about like who had the most influence, whoever reached the most people directly, regardless of the reach of the things that influenced them in the first place. If they most of the people who saw Dragon Ball Z, the reason I call it so influential is those people had not seen Astro Boy. I had never heard of Astro Boy. I had never heard of Osamu Tezuka. I was a kid from the 90s, and there were just not only more people on planet Earth in the 90s than in the 60s, but larger global culture. There was just more opportunity for somebody to be the most influential manga author. That was created by Tezuka. So again, he is the most important, the most integral. But I think if we're talking about what artist inspired other artists to draw the most, I think Akira Toriyama takes the cake. And also the people who he inspired to draw most directly, are also the biggest successes in the world now. So there's a very real feeling that like, sure, you wouldn't have Toriyama without Tezuka, but the amount that you wouldn't have without Toriyama, if we only had Tezuka but never had Toriyama, we wouldn't have anywhere close to the level of influence that anime now has culturally worldwide. So that's why just to be a little bit more in the logic about why I consider Toriyama to be the all-time most influential illustrator. And, I don't want to get too weepy in memorializing in this video because I already have another one that's about that. I want to talk about his manga, like the why we all love this guy so much. He wrote this amazing manga, and when I was a kid, I was not particularly like a huge Dragon Ball kid. To me, Dragon Ball it was too masculine, too also too kind of grown up. Like the characters, granted, we're talking about Dragon Ball Z here, which was what was shown first in the U.S. By the time I found out like more about Dragon Ball Z, by the time I was really taking an interest, I think Dragon Ball had started airing late night on Cartoon Network. So I was kind of familiar with both of them, but I'd never gotten into it in a big way. Mostly because I was just such a Pokemon fan. Like that was my dedication. I was obsessed with Pokemon, and that was, what was on my mind all the time when other people were talking about and thinking about DBZ. But because I was familiar with it, when Shonen Jump started, which was how I found out about manga at all. Like I think I vaguely knew about it because a cousin of mine had a few manga, but I hadn't realized that like manga was usually the source material for anime until Shonen Jump, and they literally have the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, the Yu Yu Hakusho manga, and the Dragon Ball manga, or Dragon Ball Z actually I think they started with. So it was a feeling of like, oh shit, this is where these all come from, and in Shonen Jump, when they started it, they also ran Sandland. And it's interesting because I think everything else that was in Shonen Jump had an anime adaptation in Japan at the time, and most of those were going to come to the US eventually. So, like Shaman King and Naruto, and I don't think Bleach ran in Shonen Jump actually until after the anime came out. Like, they started releasing the volumes and they advertised that fact, but I think they then retroactively, because the anime became popular, put it into the magazine. But Sandland was the only thing in there that had no anime. It had no plans for an anime until now. There is an anime that's coming out soon for Sandland, finally. And so this was like the most mysterious and interesting manga to me, in the sense that it was this like unheard of, random, very short story created by the Dragon Ball guy. And like, I didn't have the concept of one shots or like short manga, anything like that, you know. So this was like the first exposure, I think, that me and a lot of Westerners who were getting into manga, discovering it, had to the idea that like not every manga, even from like a major author, is necessarily built to be this endless story. And even this one apparently was not supposed to be as long as it is. Toriyama had planned it as just a one shot, and then I think he like pitched it to someone, and they you know, were like, this could be elaborated into a full volume, so they did that. But he regretted it, because the concept of this is that it's about stealing a tank. This group of there's a the demon lord's son, Beelzebub, and his like assistant, who's like an old gremlin guy. They team up with this old man, basically because they're all just really nice people who are like raiding water ships to supply them. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself describing the plot here. What the point is that Toriyama wanted to draw this manga about an old man stealing a tank, and then as he started drawing it, realized that drawing a tank over and over again is really difficult, and so he regretted having this idea, but he already had the whole story planned out, so he just went ahead and did it. And yeah, so we end up with this desert tank story. So I remember reading at least some of this as a kid, but I remember not really knowing what was going on. I think partly because I started Shonen Jump with the third issue, and so, you know, which was where Shaman King started. So I felt like very compelled by the fact that I knew Shaman King from the beginning. I understood what was going on in the story, and Naruto wasn't too hard to catch up on, but like, that was one where once the volume came out, I was like very eager to buy it, because it's like, oh my god, I could finally figure out what the hell this story is about, you know, that I've been kind of reading in these Shonen Jump chapters. But yeah, the Sandland ones, I think the story just went over my head. Like, reading it now as an adult, I can easily see how me as a kid would not have gotten much out of this. Other than thinking the artwork looked cool. I think what had bothered me actually as a kid was that I didn't understand what the point of Beelzebub was in the story. Like, I didn't understand what he was doing there. And the answer to me as an adult is kind of just like, well, yeah, he's there to be a cute character that kids can like. You know, he's there to make it so someone like me as a child would bother at all reading a manga that's really about this old man stealing this tank. And Beelzebub is just something Toriyama wanted to draw, I guess, you know, like a cute idea for a character that would make this a marketable story. Because if Beelzebub wasn't there, like, just look at this page, look at these panels. If I told you that this was like not Toriyama, but if I told you this was Katsuhiro Otomo, I wonder if you would believe me. Like, it feels like I'm reading something like Akira, not Akira Toriyama, but Akira, the manga by Katsuhiro Otomo. It just like, there's so much more realism and like a focus on old guys, and the story is really like it's presented in a very fun way, but it's a pretty edgy story. I guess I'll get into talking about the actual plot, because what struck me the most about revisiting Toriyama's work is how much influence it's had on me, even as somebody who wasn't like the biggest fan, somebody who didn't grow up like idolizing him in the way that, you know, the manga authors I did idolize, like Masashi Kishimoto idolized Toriyama, and that gave me respect for him. It made me appreciate Dragon Ball as a kid, that like, okay, even if it's not my thing, this has made so many people excited. This has made so many people care, and even the people who like it have now created things that I like. So, it was kind of like a respect, if not necessarily admiration. But now, as I go back through this stuff, I'm struck by like how these story concepts have sat in my mind, and in particular, without going into too much detail about the comic that I've written, it is a Sand Planet comic. So there's shades of. And Sandland itself, I mean, this is not that old, so I'm sure this is also influenced by some of the same things that my comic is influenced by, in terms of like Mad Max or Dune, Star Wars, like all these obvious, like massive sci-fi properties that have Sand Planet as part of the setting. But I also have read Sandland as a kid, and so and Dragon Ball, and like going back to these stories, I was surprised to realize how much influence these had, because they weren't even in my brain when Trigun is the first thing I think of when I think Sand Planet anime that would have influenced me, But then I just find concepts in these Toriyama stories that I'm like, oh shit. Or even if they're not things that I did use already, things that I now want to use in the future, where I'm like, wait a minute, this is how you do a Sand Planet. Like, this is sick. So, it's definitely massively inspiring looking at Toriyama's work. I get to this image and I'm like, okay, well, this is Dune, right? Like, this is just Baron Harkonnen in Sandland. So, like, I see the cross section of we're all kind of pulling from the same sources, but doing something a little bit different each time. And, this story is fun. It's got a really good core narrative. I feel like it takes a few chapters to pick up, because it's only really once we learn the backstory of like why the old man is fighting. This is chapter 5, so like this is when I started to be like, okay, now I get what is the point of this story. Although Beelzebub is still pretty much just there to be cute, he's just a good-natured demon kid. Most of what the story is about is like the government manipulating people to have prejudice against one another and to basically be powerless in the face of their total control over the water supply. It's classic sci-fi shit. It's classic dystopian desert planet. Old man with a tank who used to be part of the military realizes that it's all a conspiracy, and so he sets out to dismantle it, and it's a good time. So unfortunately, the website I read this on has pretty shit translation. Well, it's not the translation that's the problem. It's just not written well in English, so it kind of doesn't read very well. I would recommend picking up the official release of this if you can find it. I would love to own a physical copy of Sandland, but I don't know where I'd find it unless they're gonna reprint it or anything like that. So, or maybe they have, and I just don't even know about it. Sandland is great. Akira Toriyama is great. I was happy to revisit this series. And now I'm going to go and talk about what is hot in Shonen Jump right now. Of course, I'm talking about Kagurabachi. We're coming back. This has stayed strong. This has stayed really exciting. It's currently in I would call it like a hype building little segment. Like, we're at the start of a new arc. We're kind of setting up characters, getting into their personalities, figuring out why we want to see everybody beat the shit out of each other. I really liked in chapter 23, the villain, this guy, he has a warehouse inside of him, like in his soul. He has a warehouse, and that's where they're keeping the sacred blade that the main character's trying to reclaim. So he's like, well, if you kill me, the warehouse shuts down and everything in it disappears. So you're going to have to fucking find a way to get inside of me, I guess. But he's got all these fucking fighting dudes who, are going to defend him. And they're like, yeah, we're the bad guys. We're the cool guys. We're going to fuck you up. We have a little backstory to basically just reassure us of how this sword super should not be used by anybody, including the Shinuchi, which are like the I guess they're like the Shinsengumi, basically, like a modern take on that. And yeah, his dad clearly did not want them to have the swords. I mean, the government was letting his dad hold on to these swords, I assume, for a long time. So something had to have changed that led to the decision that he had to die and the swords all had to be taken away. Like, his dad was clearly planning to hand all this shit down and entrust it to his son. He was going to tell him about what happened. I'll tell you about it later, he says. Nah. Sorry, Dad. Here's another scene I thought was interesting. So, this kid, Hakuri, um, he's like the younger brother of all these bad dudes who protect the warehouse man. And older brother Shear shows up, and he's a clear demented abuser. But the way this paneling is done, I talked about last time how they always undercut the violence when it comes from bad guys against good guys. Like, this manga doesn't want a satisfying shot of the bad guys winning. I actually had to look over these panels a couple times to really understand what's happening. Like, the brother winds up a punch and then hits him in the gut. But it's so weird and jarring that it requires you to think about what just happened because it's not immediately evident. And that makes it suck, as an experience for you. Not the manga. The manga's good. It makes it for you a shitty experience to be like, oh man, he's getting beat up and abused and dropped down the stairs and shit. And it's the second that your brain takes to catch up with what's happening that undercuts the satisfaction of seeing violence that you would normally get from just thinking violence looks cool. Whereas here, well, actually, this is a bad example because this is a case where he's actually really getting his shit rocked. But as soon as the good guys show up, you've got the gratifying, bam, get him in the face, cool shots that, make the violence look awesome because the bad guys are losing. So I think there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff being done in this manga to keep its message feeling on point about its take on violence. All right, getting into some newer manga that have just started that I'm interested in. This one is called Famires Iko, meaning let's go to a family restaurant. It's very, very understated. There's this chapter 0 that's about this guy basically just, he's just looking for a nice place to chill, basically. Heads to this family restaurant and realizes that he likes this waiter guy, makes him feel at peace. And so he asks him if he's hiring. And it's really like a very low-key workplace. I guess I would call it a comedy. Part of the humor is just this guy's personality is, more different than you might expect. But also there's this duo that hangs out at the cafe who the setup here is pretty brilliant because this whole chapter is making these guys look like they're gangsters and they're talking about having to kill someone, only to reveal at the end that actually, spoilers, I guess, if you're already interested in reading this, just go read it. But the reveal is that they're manga authors and that they're actually just talking about what they're going to be doing next in the plot. And then the next chapter continues having those characters, observing what's going on in the restaurant and drawing their manga while these two guys are hanging out. And I can't tell exactly what direction this manga is going in. It feels like BL. It feels like these two guys are supposed to be a couple, we're supposed to be shipping them, or that they're going to end up together. There's just a lot of, flirtatious energy between them. I don't know if this is just my projection. This is just what I want to see. I don't know anything about the magazine this runs in or whatever, or what to expect from the author. I just know it feels like a really chill, really fun BL story set in a family restaurant, and it's been pretty enjoyable so far. This one is wild. This is Kommunismus. Another one I don't know anything about the author or where this is published or how. But this one's got a crazy story, and it's very edgy, it's very dark, but it's presented in a cutesy kind of funny way. Not funny haha funny if this wasn't kind of cutesy and funny, it would be unreadably bleak. Because the events, it's about the occupation of Cambodia after the Vietnam War, and in particular about a Japanese photographer who's like 12 who ventured overseas in order to try and become a famous war photographer. But by the time they got to the war zone, everybody had pretty much abandoned Vietnam because it's just not like the sexy conflict anymore. Everybody's trying to get to Cambodia and take pictures there. And so he goes there, and it's kind of, I would almost compare it, maybe just because this is also a movie about like the time period, to like the Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now story of like the character just kind of seeing one, but like encountering characters who represent in some way like microcosmically just a whole aspect of the fucked shit that's going on in this conflict in this place. First he meets this reporter who like is like trying to bang him. She's the one, even though he's 12, she's the one who like told him about going to Cambodia. And I believe she gets her throat slit by the end of this chapter. It's plenty violent and shocking. Yeah, there we go. This shot gets her throat slit with a hoe. So yeah, like this shit goes off. It goes hard. Oh yeah, so the chapter ends with the main character finds a little girl who, using these like, I don't even know what the fuck she's fighting with. She's just like whipping these things around and fucking cutting people to pieces, and the two of them become like a badass team who, because of the photography skills, our main character is now also a sniper. So yeah, they're gonna fight their way through surviving Cambodia. It's this is like the type of manga that I feel like as I'm reading it, like on a political level, I don't know how I am supposed to feel other than like, wow, yeah, that's, the world is a bad place, but at least this artwork looks awesome. So I'll read all of it. I enjoyed it. I don't have much to say about the things it comments on. I think I'd rather it spoke for itself. Now for a couple of manga that I have not finished yet. They are, I think, both complete, but I want to share just for now because I think they're awesome. This one is Dark Dreams at Dusk. This is mostly I would call this the most of a just LGBT issues manga that I've ever read. It's sort of a slice of life drama about this kid. He's considering killing himself because basically his classmates have found out that he's gay. He's trying to keep it hidden. He's in a very unaccepting environment, but he finds this strange woman who jumps off a cliff and lives in front of him, and she has a safe space. Basically, this house is just, the best way I can put it is just a place for people to come and be safe and let out their feelings and be themselves and not be worried about where they are. And so as he comes to meet people in this space, he learns more about himself, more about, other gay people and their relationships. But the strongest scenes in this to me are the portrayal of the emotions of otherness, particularly like this whole scene. I think this is the start of chapter 2, where they're all mocking him for being gay, and like in their minds it's just like, well, it's just funny, it's just jokes, it's just whatever, but like he is gay. So for him it's like these people are basically telling me they want me dead, or that like I am less than human. And like just standing there being in an environment like that, like particularly this feeling, like these pages is something I relate to a lot, of like that feeling of, I'm just like not even in this reality with these people. Like I cannot logically inhabit the same space as people who feel this way without saying anything, and eventually he kind of just shouts and runs. And it's like, he's not prepared to like deal, like he doesn't even understand the feelings himself. He's not prepared to argue about them, but at the same time, like he can't just sit there and take it. So that's basically what this is, a personal discovery story There's a lesbian couple that's older that is also dealing with, like, one of them's out, the other one's not, and he's trying, kind of watching their struggle and learning from it. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. I will definitely finish this manga. And now, what might have been my favorite thing that I read this week. This is. I remember one time reading this big book of manga, like an ultimate guide to manga that my uncle got me one time. And there's a whole section in it about porn manga that I probably shouldn't have had access to as a kid. But I remember being particularly struck by, there were images from this one about, like, a woman having sex with a giant snake thing, like a giant or river dragon or something. Like, I guess it was a thing that really happened in Japanese history, where they would, like, sacrifice maidens to the god of the river. But it's certainly inspired a lot of stuff. There's an episode of Inuyasha, actually, where this happens also. But this is, like, what if you're just, regular Japanese lady getting married off to Snake God, and it turns out, well, he's not even a god. He's just a big snake. Turns out the snake's a really nice guy, and he really loves you. He's really protective. He's cool. He's chill. The only problem is that you are instinctively fucking terrified of him in all ways. He is a literal predator, giant snake monster. So, the early chapters of this are mostly about, like, the discomfort comedy of this woman. Like, she wants no part of this. This is just a fate she's been driven to. Her village just fucking stuck her with the snake. It's a giant snake. She's terrified. The snake is super excited. He's like, I got a wife. This is awesome. I'm going to treat her amazing. We're going to have this awesome life together. He's, like, giddy about it. But he also can't really read her emotions because, he's a snake. So he doesn't really get that she's uncomfortable initially. But as it goes on, like, the relation, this is like a legit romance manga. This is a legitimate, this woman falls in love with this snake. It's about they develop a bond. They start understanding each other. They start working together. They have moments. She fucks the snake. It gets to a point. There's a whole chapter of her just fucking this snake. It's hilarious. It's amazing. It's got badass scenes, like the snake fighting this bear. There's tanukis and stuff. There's lots of Japanese folklore, lots of feminist themes, lots of relationship themes. It's really endearing. Like, the characters are really lovable. It's easy to back. Like, right from the start, the romance, you're like, well, I kind of want it to work out because it seems like a good guy, but at the same time, you understand why she's so uncomfortable about it. And then, as they get closer, it's sweet. Yeah, this is the one where they fuck, I believe. Oh no, this is where they first try to fuck and she's too afraid because she can't get over the vibes. And so this kind of sours their relationship for a while. But eventually they make up and they end up making passionate love. The girl fucks the snake. I don't know what else to tell you. If you already know if you're gonna like this manga. I've shown you more than enough. So that's Manga Monday this week. Oh, I will be picking back up Undead Unluck and maybe Kindergarten Wars, because I read there were a lot of comments from people who said that Undead Unluck picks back up, that it stays interesting, that it gets really crazy, that the pacing is really wild. Someone suggested to me that Shonen Jump manga generally don't start really getting into their story until the second volume. That's debatable. I mean, Kagurabachi pretty much blasted the fuck off. It was just story the whole way through. But, whatever. I'm willing to give Undead Unluck another shot because people seem to like it. But otherwise, keep letting me know what you think I should read down in the comments. And that's all. Manga forever.